Before talking about reasonable efforts, we have to be very clear about what the defendant was actually arguing. The defendant's position was simple. The plaintiff promised me nothing. Therefore, there was no exchange and no contract. What Cardozo does at this point is often misunderstood. He does not add a duty. He does not invent a promise. He does not rewrite the contract. Instead, the court does only one thing. The judge says to the defendant, once the plaintiff has entered the field and taken a position, once the plaintiff has acted as an agent, you cannot say that the plaintiff made no promise at all. That is the entire move. The court is not creating anything new. It is simply rejecting a defense. In this situation, the plaintiff has already acted. The plaintiff has already stepped into a role that necessarily carries responsibility. Because of that conduct, the plaintiff's behavior itself is recognized as an implied promise, not a promise invented by the court, but a promise recognized from what has already been done. And once the defendant is no longer allowed to argue that the plaintiff promised nothing, the scope of their promise is already implied as well. Once the plaintiff has taken the position, the implied promise naturally includes a duty to use reasonable efforts. That is where reasonable efforts appears. Reasonable efforts is not the source's consideration. It is not a new obligation added by the court. It is simply the language used to describe the extent of a promise that already exists. So if you understand this case correctly, it is not about the court creating duties. It is about the court saying one thing and only one thing. Once a party is entered and acted, you cannot deny that a promise exists at all.